Fortnite OG just dropped, and with it there are a ton of new endgame mechanics, so let's take a look at how these new zones work, how to rotate them, and much more. Before we get to the moving zones, let's look at a few zones before that at the 5th and 6th zones. These zones are not partial zones, and therefore in the zone before, so the 4th and 5th zones, you want to try to play towards the center of the zone to guarantee that you get at least a very close rotation into the next zone. Following the 6th zone, we go right into the first movement. This means that because there's no half and half zone, there's basically no dead side of any of the moving zones, but there are ways to play into safe spaces. When the zone is moving diagonally, an area in the zone called the expanding side opens up, resulting in there being an easy spot to rotate through. The other new zone mechanic in this season is the new static zones. When the 7th and 8th zones close, there's a new short period of time where the zone doesn't move at all. This is a great time to get as much information on the lobby as possible. There is now no excuse for not knowing exactly what your rotation for the next moving zone is going to be, and you should also take this time to figure out what plays you're going to make on the next moving zone. During this time, it is also a great opportunity to look for potential refreshes, but you want to make sure that you are incredibly safe while going for these plays. This means that in general, you should try to avoid box fighting teams unless you really need to. Instead, play back in your tarp and try to spray teams that might be unaware, or try to take the time to spray teams on your lair so that they leave your lair, giving you an easier rotation on the next zone. Right now there are 3 mobility items, the Rift-to-Go, the Grappler, and the Launchpad, but we also know that we are getting ballers later in the season. Let's go over each of these 4 items though and how to play them. First up is the Rift-to-Go. This is probably the strongest mobility item that you can carry, but there's some things that you need to be doing to make sure that you use it correctly. The first thing you need to do is to use it in the center of your box. This is because if you use it on the edge of the box, then the Rift will poke through the edge of the box, and this allows other teams to steal your Rift, giving the other teams in the lobby an easy rotation. That being said, if you are a team without a Rift, then you should be trying to listen and look for other players using a Rift so you can use it yourself. If you can be aware of the teams around you so you can steal their rifts, you can give yourself a huge advantage in the endgame. Once you actually are in the sky, if the high team isn't looking up, then you should just take the free rotate into the zone. If the high team is looking up at you though, you should try to glide straight down and then glide right under the high team. This will allow you to make it as hard as possible for height to hit you, and you can still get to the front side of the zone while gliding like this. The final thing I want to talk about Rift-to-Go's is that you can go late with your Rift-to-Go, and then you can be the last team in the air. This allows you to then land on height last, setting yourself up well to win the game. The next mobility item that we're going to look at is the Grappler. The Grappler is really strong this season, especially because you can use it to help you rotate during all parts of the game. When using the Grappler, it is important to scout your rotated path before you go. Try to find something, whether it's trees, a house, or old builds to grapple to, because you don't want to get caught in a position where you don't have a good place to grab. The last mobility that's in the game right now is launchpads. You can get launchpads from supply drops, and they are especially strong because they don't take up an inventory slot. When going to launchpad, make sure that you have a clear spot where you can easily launch from, and make sure you talk about in duos or just think about where you want to glide. Ideally, like rifts, you glide right under the high team until you get to the ideal spot you want to. The final mobility I want to talk about isn't in the game yet, but it will soon be depending on when you're watching this video, which is the baller. Assuming it has all the same mechanics as it did in chapter 1, the most important part of the baller is making sure that you keep it healthy. This means that you want to make sure that you're boxing it up in the mid game and in the end game as well if you have the opportunity. The other really important thing to be aware of with ballers is that boogie bombs will kick you out of baller. This means that you need to be careful of boogie bombs, especially in the end game, or if you want a free baller in the end game, then you can carry boogies and use them to kick a player out of their ball, which you can then steal. In OG Fortnite, there are no quick heals. This means that the zone plays you probably got used to are no longer viable. Instead, you need to really prioritize playing front side of the zone so you can, if needed, spend the 5 seconds to get a big pot off or the 15 seconds to get a chug chug off. This season, you need to be much more proactive with your plans to heal, as you don't have the luxury of using a slurp and getting back to 200 HP instantly. This is a complete guide of all the new endgame changes that you need to learn in OG Fortnite, but if you want to learn some more educational Fortnite content, check out the video on screen. Peace.